and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Once again, we are going to talk about Afghanistan because at this moment it seems that Afghanistan, whatever is happening in Afghanistan is actually defining the future of the region. Not only the fact remains that the Taliban is very quickly gaining ground. 6 provincial capitals have fallen in their wake, and not only that, the northward push continues. This is quite an intriguing thing. Where is the support coming from? How they are managing to actually renew themselves and keep on progressing. Then, of course, the circumstances in the region are quite interesting. India assumed the presidency of UNSC, and after doing that, the idea the whole time has been that everyone has to work together to find a solution in Afghanistan. India showed its colors once again by denying Pakistan representation on the table. Voice was denied to Pakistan. That goes on. Today, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan also spoke to the press, and he once again renewed Pakistan's offer that there is a mechanism between Kabul and Islamabad to resolve all mutual concerns. So instead of airing everything on television or airing their dirty laundry, they should be actually talking privately. So that is one aspect, but what exactly is going to happen in the region, we are going to talk about all those things. In order to help us understand this, first of all, watch a report that our team has prepared for you. After that, I'm going to introduce the guest in the studio.
Ever since the ousting of Afghan Taliban from power, Afghanistan has been in a constant state of conflict, with the country divided in spheres of influence of Taliban, government and coalition forces. But now the influence of the Afghan Taliban has grown to its peak ever since their ousting. Al Jazeera had reported that Taliban control 85% of Afghanistan, and now most major media outlets, including BBC and New York Times, are reporting that the Afghan Taliban have taken control of 3 provincial capitals. Previously, the Afghan Taliban were only focused on taking control of strategic routes leading to government centers and adjoining areas. In this latest offensive, the Afghan Taliban are attacking provincial capitals and have already taken over Kunduz, a major hub in northern Afghanistan, and are making their way into Saripul and Talekan. The US troop withdrawal has emboldened the Taliban, and they are now making moves to topple the Afghan government. Inside Kabul's heavily fortified green zone, a suicide bomb attack was carried out on the house of Afghanistan's Defense Minister, General Bismillah Khan Mohammadi. The minister was not at home and his family was evacuated to safety. There seems to be a sinister connection between recent Afghan Taliban offensives and India assuming the presidency of the United Nations Security Council. As many prominent Indian policymakers and academics have said, India must financially support Afghan Taliban to destabilize Afghanistan and Pakistan. It remains to be seen whether the Afghan government are strategically withdrawing to fortify in Kabul, or it is truly in an existential crisis.
Let me now introduce the guest I've got in the studio and telephone. In the studio, I'm joined by Sayyid Muhammad Ali, Director, Strategic Affairs, CASS, Islamabad, Rawalpindi. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Umar Khan Ali Sherzai Saab, former ambassador, career diplomat, also joins us. He knows these regions very extensively. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Anwar Iqbal Saab, senior journalist and institution in himself, joins us on telephone. Actually, Skype. I can see you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us from Washington, D.C. So let me start from the studio because these issues are very important. Later in the program, we will be joined by a 4th guest. When they join, I'm going to introduce them as well. Let me start with, with your permission, let me go to the cards that we have to read. I hope that the studio has those cards prepared. Let me read the cards that are here. Shah Mahmood Qureshi, I'm quoting him. Peace and stability in Afghanistan is a shared responsibility of the international community, and Pakistan has played its role in this respect. He further says, Pakistan fully rejects the baseless accusations made by the Afghan representative in the UNSC. The government of Afghanistan should refrain from blaming Pakistan for failures of others. I have invited Afghan Foreign Minister to visit Islamabad to discuss and resolve issues on the dialogue table. So now, let me come back to the studio. Let me start with Sayyid Muhammad Ali. Let me ask him to give us his understanding of the situation right now in Afghanistan. Please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Farrukh. I think the situation is becoming very precarious, and very briefly to start off and review the situation. I think militarily, as you've mentioned in your intro, the advances on the ground by Afghan Taliban are very fast and very swift. Right. And very significant. In terms of economy, it is also very important because now they control most of the border crossings. Right. So they practically control almost 60% of the trade and also the custom duties and that sort of revenues. Which indicates that they are also economically strangulating the Kabul administration, not just militarily. In terms of political environment, I think it is very interesting because some of the very important key officials, like the Kabul administration's former ambassador to Islamabad, he has also raised his concerns regarding Kabul administration asking for bombing. And while you see the international environment, it is very interesting, as you've also mentioned, that India is using this month's presidency of the UN Security Council to expose its true intentions, that they want to use the Afghan conflict in order to accelerate and escalate the hybrid warfare against Pakistan, in order to Pakistan, absolutely, to frame it as an irresponsible country, and that is also quite obvious. But the most important development which is going to happen in the next 2 days is going to be the Troika Plus meeting, in which 3 of the permanent members of the UN Security Council will review this situation, because the biggest leverage that the international community has right now on the Afghan Taliban is the UN sanctions list, because if they offer them some olive branch that in return for some restraint they could be offered international recognition, then that's something on which some progress can be made. However, the last point is that from the Afghan Taliban's perspective, their ground situation reflects their most important leverage, and for them it makes sense that they believe that they need to carry on their advancements, and the international environment will eventually yield to the ground realities, even if it is not doing it right now.
Right, and that international situation never yielded to the ground realities when last time they were in power. I don't know what exactly happens later. Let me also ask Ambassador Saab to actually give us his introductory assessment of the situation.
Well, as my friend said, that the situation in Afghanistan is certainly precarious. The ground realities are that the Afghan Taliban are gaining grounds day by day, and in my previous conversations during different talk shows, I had mentioned that whenever the American leaves, it will not take the Afghan Taliban even a month to take over the entire Afghanistan.
Right.
So that is exactly what is happening, because the Afghan forces are so much demoralized. And on the other hand, the Afghan Talibans are not the Talibans of the 1990s.
Okay.
Now they have very good relations with Russia, with China, and now they are getting support from lots of quarters.
Good relations with India as well?
No, the Indians, ran away as soon as, the Taliban took over Kandahar. They ran away. They know that they can never have good relations, because the Taliban have always had a soft corner for Pakistan.
Okay.
And I think they are very realistic also, because the Afghan government, whatever government it is, would always depend on Pakistan.
Right. It is a landlocked
development, because it is geography, it is not
Right.
politics.
You said that it is a slam dunk that Afghan Taliban is going to take over Afghanistan, right? The problem hasn't been, last time, it wasn't actually taking over the country, it was sustaining their control. Eventually we saw, first, they couldn't actually do away with all pockets of resistance. Later on, we saw that presence of other elements actually played in the hands of the invading army and actually reversed the tide. So why would that not happen this time?
Sir, I would differ a little. They had taken complete control of Afghanistan, except the Panjshir Valley, which
Right.
they would have taken over in any case. But in the meanwhile, you know, the Americans intruded into Afghanistan, and I think there was no solid reason for their intervention in Afghanistan. And but whatever it was, I personally feel that as a Pakistani and as a former diplomat, I had always said that our government, we must support Taliban.
Okay.
Because when the Taliban were in power, we had no problems on our borders with them.
Right.
And they have helped us in lot of matters.
They never resolved their deodorant line though, right? And they never actually turned over Lashkar-e-Jhangvi territories who were hiding in Afghanistan.
Well, frankly speaking, you know, it would have taken a little time. You know, it was too premature to ask them, because they were not, as you yourself said, that they were not even properly stabilized. That they had only taken control of Kabul and lots of other places. But in the meanwhile, you know, the Americans attacked Afghanistan, you making a false excuse of 9/11 and all that.
Okay.
So
I'm going to come back to you, sir, with your permission. Let me bring in Anwar Iqbal Sahab, who is very patiently waiting for his turn. Anwar Iqbal Sahab from Washington DC, what is your assessment of situation in Afghanistan, and in which way the wind is blowing, sir?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I did a small story, a brief story today for Dawn, which is published in today's paper, which says that American government has asked all U.S. citizens, and obviously most of the citizens still in Afghanistan are those of Afghan origins. They have asked all U.S. citizens to leave the country and return to the United States. And they are also offering repatriation money to those who do not have the resources to come here. So that shows that Americans have also accepted the fact that Afghanistan is gradually but definitely moving into Taliban hands, and they are getting ready to deal with it. How would they deal with it is a different issue. I mean, they say that they will recognize that government if it is a multi-party or multi-group government which includes all the Afghan factions, particularly the present Afghan government, and that they will not recognize it if it is a forcibly installed government, that if it is a Taliban-only government. So that we will have to wait for a few more days to see how the United States react to a Taliban takeover. I think they will not recognize it, they will not accept it, and they will react negatively to such a government. But right now, Washington seems to have accepted the fact that Kabul has gone.
Right. Sir, if it is a slam dunk, if it is taken for granted, why is it that we still believe that Doha process is intact? Otherwise, we would have seen the American government actually releasing the information or agreement that was signed between President Donald Trump's government and Afghan Taliban. They could have at least done this by blaming the previous government, could they not?
You, you're right. You're absolutely right. They still are. I mean, the hope is not lost. After all, you're dealing with a superpower. They have enough resources and they have enough patience to wait for as long as they want. And they still are trying to start the process for a political settlement, which seems to have stopped now. And Pakistan also has been talking about the importance of a political settlement during his recent visit to Washington. The Pakistan National Security Advisor said so in all his briefings that we do not want a forcible takeover in Kabul. We want a political settlement. We want a government that involves all factions. So I think Washington is hoping that it would be able to persuade the Taliban to accept some understanding. And Washington, you must have noticed that recently they sent the envoys to all Central Asian countries, to India, to Russia, and Washington also believes that China and the United States, at least on Afghanistan, are on the same page, because the Chinese are as worried about a militant government in Kabul as the Americans are, because that may have a direct bearing on the situation in Xinjiang. So therefore they are hoping that they will be able to bring enough regional pressure. Now they are trying to bring regional pressure on Afghanistan, on the Taliban, to bring about the change that they want.
Right. I'm going to come back to you shortly, Anwar Iqbal sir. Let me come back to Sayyid Muhammad Ali. Dr. Saab, once again, you actually brought up the Tricom Plus meeting. What do you anticipate is going to happen? Because there was a Doha agreement, and it doesn't, the circumstances on ground don't seem to comport to that. So what becomes of everything in coming days, and what are these big powers thinking?
I think it's a very important and fleeting opportunity that we'll see in Doha 2 days from now, for three reasons. One, because as Anwar Saab also pointed out, and it is very important that that our viewers understand that the US has resumed its bombings against the Afghan Taliban. What does that mean? That means that from Afghan Taliban's perspective, for all practical purposes, Doha Agreement is history. Because then they will also believe, and their spokesman has also said so, that they will also not be bound by the commitment of not using violence. And that actually is very interesting, as Anwar Saab also pointed out, that the advisory given to the US citizens to leave Afghanistan came on the same day, actually a night before the bombing started. Because they wanted to obviously secure and save the lives of the Americans, that because they could expect some sort of retaliation against the American interests and lives from Afghan Taliban. So in this context, this could be, I have discussed people in Kabul, that how significant is the tactical effect of this bombing on Afghan Taliban, and it is said that it will have diplomatic impact, it will have psychological impact, it will not have significant military impact for two reasons. Number one, because they have already captured most of the rural areas, and they are now encircling and moving close to the urban cities. So this bombing, which is also not surgical strikes, it is from B-52s, free fall bombs. So that will make it very difficult for Americans, even if they want to support Kabul administration in fighting Afghan Taliban, to avoid collateral damage, because if they bomb Afghan Taliban's positions which are close to the cities, it will be very difficult to actually attack them, because they are not in the free field.
Sorry to cut you. I understand that you want to explain the dynamics, but my concern basically is about Tricolor's meeting, right? I have seen the statements that were given at the UNSC, especially China particularly talked about ATM, right?
Yes.
And IMU was also brought up by Russia. Now the question at this moment is, while they are going to talk about, when they are going to meet, are they going to talk about how to convince Taliban not to allow these people any kind of spaces within their controlled territory? And will that happen? or something else is
I
going to happen?
think this is the key leverage that Afghan Taliban has over Moscow and Beijing, that their visit to both these capitals is very significant, because you must have noticed the statement by the special Russian envoy, Ambassador Zamir Kabulov, that his stance on Afghan Taliban is more similar to that of Pakistan than that of India, and they're more sensitive to that. Similar is the situation with China, that Pakistan and Beijing share this expectation from Afghan Taliban that they will not allow the territory of Afghanistan to be used against the interests of Pakistan and China, by ensuring that TTP and also ETIM do not use it to the detriment of these two countries. So I think when the Troika Plus meets, it is very important that US will obviously expect the leverage they have over Afghan Taliban is the international legitimacy that their spokesperson has said, and also Secretary Blinken has said.
Any precedent to support that this time they are going to cooperate? Any precedent that they are going to turn over the wanted terrorists wanted by these countries, China, Russia, Pakistan?
I think it will be unrealistic to expect it an immediate thaw or a breakthrough. But I think the ice is melting, but it will take a lot of time. And from Afghan Taliban's perspective, their main leverage, fortunately or unfortunately, the reality is their violence and territorial control. And they believe, like perhaps Azerbaijan, for example. Azerbaijan is a small country, but when they secured their territory from Armenia, the world yielded to the reality, and that is what
I was talking. Let me actually go back to Ambassador Saab. Ambassador Saab, all these wanted terrorists who might be hiding. Actually, we see the reports that they are hiding in Afghanistan near Pakistan's border. Especially, I'm talking about TTP and the Baloch sub-nationalists and all that. And they are hiding there, and they carry on attacks across the border, and they find a way to influence that kind of attack as well. In coming days, do you think there is any precedent that the Afghan Taliban is going to turn over all these wanted terrorists to countries that want them, while they actually increase this way in Afghanistan?
It is a very important point, but it all depends on Pakistan's policy towards Taliban.
Okay.
If we have a friendly policy towards Taliban and we don't try to interfere in their domestic matters, and whatever support that we can provide to them, we should be there. Then the Taliban would certainly support, all whatever you want to do. When they were in power, they never supported the TTP or the Baloch dissidents.
Yeah, but
the problem is,
Basra was inside their country, right? And our interior minister flew to Kabul demanding that he be given.
With due apology, there were lots of wanted people in our country which we were not even aware of, and they were.
But we had when our interior minister was there.
Why you expect the Taliban to do all these things overnight? Let them settle down, and you take up all these issues after they settle down and resume the power.
Right. When they have a position of power, then you negotiate with them.
You are asking for a meat before the goat is slaughtered.
No, I'm asking the goat to actually show its compassion right now.
Well, it all depends on your policy. If you show magnanimity towards the Taliban, good policies with Taliban, and Afghanistan is
magnanimity so far is not enough.
Listen,
magnanimity so far is not enough.
My view is that for us, our national interest should be the most important thing.
Right.
And our national
and a group who has that has killed 80,000 Pakistanis should be our number one priority, right? To get rid of. and that those people are hiding in now Afghan-controlled territory, that becomes a concern.
Your own security authorities are controlling the borders. You know,
Right.
the situation has changed,
Right.
and it is your responsibility to protect your people. As for their cross-border movement is concerned, let the Taliban control the government. Then you ask them to that this is our requirement and help us.
Okay,
Because
I'm going to come back to
they
you,
would
sir.
need.
Ali Saab wanted to come in, and then I have to go to...
Yeah, very quickly, I think it's very important that this changing environment is what Kabul administration is doing. They are physically and militarily becoming very weak, but they are trying to survive through diplomatic and psychological support coming from India. So you see a very hostile narrative on the social media and also, you know, the Indian presidency as well. So your point is very important. Coming to that point, I think the major concern that Pakistan has, and here I share Ambassador Saab's view, that our national security interest is the paramount consideration, and that is why Pakistan and also Beijing has demanded unequivocally from Afghan Taliban that, you know, it is Pakistan has an important role in steering this process and facilitating this, even the Troika Plus process, that if the Afghan Taliban want to convert their battlefield victory into international diplomatic legitimacy and recognition, then they have to be sensitive to Pakistan's national security interest, and offer some commitment that these spoilers which enjoy the space in Afghanistan, which are using this to attack Pakistan daily, must subside, and Afghan Taliban have actually given a diplomatic commitment. But let's see how they actually deliver. That is very important.
And my concern is that even if they don't allow the people hiding on their land to attack Pakistan, their existence, those groups, might inspire some kind of, terrorist activities within Pakistan. That becomes a concern. But then there is the framing of international narrative. Let me go back to Anwar Iqbal Saab. Anwar Iqbal Saab, earlier it was pointed out that Indian government actually keeps on providing moral support or at least propaganda support to Afghan government. But simultaneously, we see that they have been trying to engage the Taliban as well. I'm sure that the Indian government is capable of doing more than one thing at a time, like we are. But the concern right now is there a possibility that in the end, everyone will end up blaming Pakistan for whatever Afghan Taliban do, regardless of how much influence we have got with them?
Well, I mean, it's a very tricky situation for Pakistan. Like Pakistan, the extent of Pakistan's support for the Taliban, as Ambassador Saab pointed out, that is very important, and that will determine Taliban's attitude towards Pakistan. But the extent of Pakistan's support to the Taliban again depends on international recognition of the Taliban government in Kabul. Pakistan cannot go against the entire international community all the time, or even most of the time. The last time the Taliban were in power, only Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the United States recognized the Taliban government. If this time, if say China and Russia also come forward and they recognize it, and then Pakistan does, then the situation will be different. But if they do not, and Pakistan is the only country that ends up recognizing the Taliban government, then Pakistan will not have enough room to maneuver, and Pakistan will be in a very difficult position. And India will obviously exploit that position and will try to create problems for Pakistan, as it is already doing. You saw what happened in the UN Security Council. Although India is the president of the council only for a month, but one of the first things they did was to set a debate on Afghanistan. And usually the UN tradition is, I was reading through UN documents yesterday, which showed that whenever a country which in any way is a party to a conflict, even if it is not a UN member, it is allowed to speak, although it's not allowed to vote, but it is allowed to speak. But it's because the council basically is just hearing yet another opinion, and the more the merrier. but India did not let Pakistan speak. It used its connection, it used its presidency to stop Pakistan from doing so. So I think international support for the Taliban, as you said, will depend a lot on how the Taliban behave, and Pakistan's support for the Taliban will depend on how the international community behaves, and therefore I think that's why you see all this, as you said, the Doha process is going on and other negotiation processes. I think that's why there is room for more talks. There is room for a political settlement. I personally believe that that's what we should all focus on, because having a government in Kabul without a political settlement will be a recipe for disaster.
Right. How much, Ali Sahab, how much time do you think negotiation has at this moment? We know that by the end of August, the US and other foreign forces are going to withdraw, and we are in the month of August, right? And now, today is 9th. I mean, we are left with 20 days or 21 days.
Yes.
Do you think miracles happen? Yeah?
I think it's a fleeting opportunity. It's a very delicate moment, and we'll realistically see violence and negotiations going in tandem, which is unfortunate, but the reality. Because for Afghan Taliban, their major leverage is their ability to expand their kinetic influence within Afghan territory, and make Kabul administration feel weak and convince Washington that they have the ability to ensure that Kabul administration actually does not survive. So US should not waste its own political capital in trying to physically protect Kabul administration, or to develop adversarial relations with an emerging regime. So that is the context in which I'm sure people, the pundits in Washington and Beltway, must also be reviewing realistically. They have ideological, differences, but the reality is that is why they signed the agreement in the Doha. But that is why eventually I see that they will perhaps, read the writing on the wall. It may not happen immediately.
Right.
But
Alisa, let me ask you another thing. Pakistan played a crucial role in, ensuring that Doha talks actually succeed.
Yes.
How much of information do we have about Doha agreement? It's fine print, because there are clauses which are secret.
That's true.
And do we know about them or we don't?
Well, the litmus test for your very important question is the commitment and ability of Afghan Taliban to ensure that the territory which is under their control is not used by spoilers against China and Pakistan.
But hang on. My question is not about that, right? Doha agreement is not between Pakistan or Taliban. It is not between Pakistan and America. It is not between Pakistan or Kabul, right?
Yes.
The question right now is, if something you actually fostered, you held actually some kind of agreement, do we have all the facts? Is there a possibility that we don't actually figure in that agreement, and in the end it might actually blow up in our face?
It is a realistic possibility.
Wow.
Because why? Because let me frankly say that who decided that Afghan Taliban should have a dedicated office in Doha? What is happening right now? Very interesting. The B-52 flights are taking off from actually from Qatar. And they are bombing Afghan Taliban, who also have a political office in Doha, and the talks are also going to be held in Doha.
So nothing makes sense, right? But Ambassador Saab, actually, one thing that I was told is never trust a thing which actually can think for itself and doesn't know where it keeps its mind or its brain, right? And at this moment, it seems that whatever Doha agreement is, maybe we are not actually that much introduced to its secret clauses. Could it be that there is a clause about us that we are going to be the target next?
Well, frankly speaking, as I said earlier, it all depends on our policies.
Okay.
You know, America has always been trying to play with Pakistan's interest, you know. They have never supported us in our difficult times.
Okay.
They have always preferred India against Pakistan. So it is a time that we should, in fact, understand what is our national interest is.
Right.
And
so last time also you actually pointed out that we have to focus on our national interest.
That is,
and you will,
and in my opinion,
Ambassador Sahab, you will agree with me that national interest includes economic security of the country, the independence of the country, the choices they have got, right? The ability to walk away or save oneself from fighting unnecessary wars. At this moment, when you are saying that one has to actually support a regime which is actually emerging, and we have to focus only on our national interests, there is a realistic possibility that this narrative of blame Pakistan, like in the past, may end up in some kind of sanctions, some kind of difficulties for Pakistan eventually. So will that not actually compromise the national interest?
Frankly speaking, you know, America has always been trying to punish Pakistan whenever they find an opportunity to punish Pakistan.
But we work together as well.
Economically, you know, with the Taliban, you had much bigger volume of trade during Taliban's time than you have with the present government.
Right.
So your economic activities would not suffer. Moreover, the Taliban have assured all these neighboring countries that they are not going to interfere in their countries. They will not create any problem. Their territory will never be used against them.
Right. So one very interesting development that took place recently was Afghan Taliban have actually, after taking control of the border areas, they have severed the transit or trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan, demanding that Pakistan lift its immigration demands, like identifying people and actually checking their passports, and whosoever actually carries a card. This is reported by Pakistani media, right? If that doesn't happen, they will continue this blockade. Now the question is, they haven't actually been born as a regime, and they're already putting out conditionalities. So do you think in coming days, they will not be dictating what we do?
Well, there are always lots of demands, but then it depends, as I said, on our approach. If you have
a gun, it is up to me whether I cooperate or die, right? That depends on me.
Well, you know, if you help them, you support them, they would certainly support you. They would not interfere in your domestic matters, whether it is passport requirements or visa requirements. They understand all these things, but sometimes, you know, there are lots of miscreants who are trying, you know, to spread rumors, you know, against the Taliban's demand and things like that. So we should not.
I will come to the rumors as well, but these are reports published by Pakistan's leading papers, all of them. And then, of course, Afghan spokesman is also quoted there. So that is quite an intriguing
development. Frankly speaking, I doubt, you know, our media is also, you know.
Sir, I cannot deny every evidence that comes to me just because Afghan Taliban are good. But Anwar Iqbal Sahab, once again, it seems that there are aspects of it that nobody has tabulated or calculated. Or is it just an impression, and every country has actually worked out the details of what they are going to do in scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3? And what do you think, how Pakistan is being viewed in the US at this moment? Are we being blamed for whatever is going on in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, of course, countries always make contingency plans, so they must have worked out something for every scenario. But you know that these things no matter how hard you work on them, they are not always accurate. I mean, like nobody was expecting a 9/11 like attack, and nobody was expecting the collapse of the Soviet Union. So things happen, and countries, even superpowers, are often found unprepared. So it is, I think, Washington realizes that no matter what prediction they make about Afghanistan, the future, they can never be certain about it. What will be the scenario for Pakistan? I think in Washington, Pakistan is still seen as an important country in an important region, and Washington does want to have, if not close partnership, at least some sort of working relationship with Pakistan. But if you talk about, say, the media, the people, or the think tanks and other sort of indicators, then Pakistan is not one of very popular countries in Washington. But since 2011, when Osama bin Laden was discovered near Abbottabad, before that, ordinary Americans didn't know much about Pakistan. But since then, the only thing they remember is that Osama bin Laden was found in Afghanistan. So that is a huge baggage that we have to carry with us, and we need to get rid of that. And we need to work on building our image. There is a lot of work to be done. But Pakistan still is not a country that America is about to abandon and move ahead. Pakistan is a nation, the Americans realize it's a nation of 220 million people. Americans realize it's a nuclear power. Americans realize that Pakistan has a huge diaspora, a lot of educated people are everywhere. There are many of them in America. And one thing that is not much mentioned in the Pakistani media, that Pakistani Americans are slowly but surely coming forward, and you find them in responsible positions in the local, state, and in the federal government. So they also will have a say in some of these matters. So I think all is not lost, but we need to work on our image.
Right. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, I'm told that we have to actually conclude the program here. We are running out of time. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, thank you very much for your precious time. Sayyid Muhammad Ali Sahab, thank you very much. Always great having you in the show. Umar Khan, Ali Shirzai Sahab, we can disagree on various things, but it is always a pleasure having you in the studio as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. Regarding what happens in Afghanistan, of course, Pakistan, despite all the insinuations by Pakistan's detractors, cannot control what happens on Afghan soil, but they are concerned. One, there is a concern that Pakistan can end up in a double whammy, where whatever Afghan Taliban do is in the end blamed on Pakistan, even if they are not listening and even if they have actually have swollen heads. On the other side, in that situation, because Pakistan has been fighting with TTP and other such terrorist outfits who actually draw their inspiration from more or less the same worldview, Afghan Taliban takeover in Kabul might actually embolden such elements as well and bring back fight on our land. These are big questions. I think at this moment, I am really surprised whenever television channels are discussing, Pakistani channels are discussing anything other than what is happening in Afghanistan. I am equally surprised when Pakistani parliament actually meets, and instead of talking about this thing, they end up talking about other things. So at this moment, I think, in my humble view, there is an existential challenge. It could be because of Afghan Taliban, it could be because of uncertainty, it could be because of India's machinations. We have to be very, very careful. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.